The townsfolk used to say the woods out past Old Grady's pond comes to life. At night, old-timers gossip about how the trees are bare and how the wind slips through the branches with a sound like a buzzing whistle. They say you shouldn't go out after dark, not unless you want to disappear. And if that is your intention, then so be it. But I always thought that was just small town paranoia, a bunch of hocus pocus. They would tell to scare the kids a bit, to keep them from getting into trouble after dark. But after my time in Afghanistan, nothing much mattered to me. Nothing scared me. I'd been a Marine recon, crawling through poppy fields where there could be an IED or a sniper waiting in ambush. Tripwires, landmines, hell, you name it, I've probably seen it. I learned to trust my instincts, to sleep with one eye open, and to keep my M4 within arm's reach. But when I came home, I traded my rifle for a toolbox and became the town's go-to handyman, fixing fences and gutters, patching up the old folks' roofs before winter made them caves of ice. If you needed a tire changed or a possum chased out of your crawl space, you call Jim. That's me. I'm Jim. I like being Mr. Good Guy. Made the nights quieter and peaceful within mine. And it made my dreams bearable. I mean, nobody in our little wooded community called me a hero. They didn't have to. That was just Jim, the guy who brought tuna casseroles to funerals and split firewood for the widows. I'd seen enough death to want to keep it up, then to live somewhere life felt small and manageable. But that was before the disappearances around our small community started. See, it began with Mrs. Larkin's spaniel, Daisy. She let it out without a leash and then it went missing. Then little Bobby Joe from 2 houses down the street, and then another little Stephanie Wagner, all went missing within days of each other. The sheriff and state troopers went out searching for them, but they never did find them. The manhunt was massive, but to me, well, they didn't search the right areas. Didn't think much of the dog with their focus being on the 2 missing children. Makes sense. But they started to think it was a kidnapping, so they expanded their search to the bigger cities. But then the sheriff's night deputy went missing. Scar did too. People started locking their doors and peering out from behind the curtains. But I knew something was wrong when I found the red web stretched between 2 birches at the far end of my property, glistening in the moonlight of an unseasonably warm September. But it wasn't the kind of web a spider would spin. It was thick, sticky cords glimmering with a sick, arterial sheen. The wind made it hum faintly when I approached it like a nest. I bent down closer and caught the sulfurous stink. A clump of hair that was brown and human hung tangled in the sickly silk. My stomach twisted a bit. I'd seen worse things, but not in southern Vermont. But the next night I saw it. I'd been making my rounds, checking on them. Old folks' homes, making sure their locks were good. It was late and the woods were restless, the wind shuddering through the pines. And that's when I heard a human scream far off into the forest. I ran, my boots chewed up the mud as I crashed through the brush with my flashlight bobbing up and down. And there, in the clearing behind the old Miller place, I saw a nightmare made of flesh. It moved like an insect, every limb a study in grotesque horror. Its body was terrible. It had a thin midsection, pinched like a wasp's, bulbous abdomen, trailing behind and grinding on the ground, leaving little streaks of blood and gore along a slick trail of yellow-black slime. Long segmented legs split out into the dirt, jointed and twitching, torn wings jutted from its back, frayed and useless and glimmering in the half. And its face was almost human, but the eyes bulged out and were huge and glossy, rimmed in red like it used a crayon to line. It had 2 arms that were hauled in vain, ending in tiny little hands that were somewhat human, and in one of those hands it clutched a woman Mistress and Oxenic from the bakery. Her mouth was slack and contorted in terror, a pour on her face. It spun her in its grasp, trailing that red web from its abdomen, cocooning her. As she writhed within, the silk sizzled as it touched her skin, and she managed to scream again, but it was low and unsteady this time. The creature's sickly black mandibles jutted from its mouth, clicking in anticipation. I froze just for a second. I was back in Kandahar, pinned by sniper fire, watching my buddy bleed out from a shrapnel wound. I shook myself free of the repressed memory and I leveled my flashlight at the thing. Its big bulbous eyes reflected back briefly. Then it scuttled into the trees, dragging Kristen behind it and still wrapping her tightly in the red silk. I stood there somewhat shocked at what I had just witnessed while Kristen's final scream filled the night. My hands trembled, the Marine in me screaming to follow, to fight, but my feet stayed rooted. I'd seen monsters before, but only ones that wore a human face. And that was when I knew the police had missed something that would tie all the disappearances together. Christ, how they missed this. Who knows? But they probably were not thinking it was some sort of human insect subspecies in rural Vermont stealing kids and dogs. How no one would ever think of such a thing. I mean, child predators, sure. Half human, half wasp. No way. I must have been insane to think what I was seeing was real, but it was. Heard humans scream in anguish and pain before in war, and that scream coming from Kristen, that was real. I went home to think about what to do. Sleep was a lost cause after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kristen's face twisted in terror, body engulfed by that red corrosive. So I saw those bulbous eyes staring at me as if they were coming for me next. I sat up late at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, staring out at the window at the tree. But sunrise, I made up my mind. I wasn't. Then another neighbor vanished. Was done being the town maybe the hunter, the sly fox, the killer that I had always had been. Was going to return to my roots. Dug out my old rucksack from the attic, one still caked with Afghan dust. The smell of sweat and gun oil hit me like a punch to the jaw. Underskunder's ton of memories tumbled out. Patrols under an oppressive regime. The pops of small arms fire. Friends who never made it home. I loaded up what I had, which wasn't much. A battered Remington shotgun, an old hunting knife, a headlamp, and 2 flasks of lighter fluid. Then I stuffed my first aid kit in the side pocket out of habit. I didn't tell anybody but the sheriff, and he chalked it up to my PTSD. He thanked me for my time and dismissed me. The neighbors would just think the war finally cracked my head too. So I left a note for Mrs. Odell, the widow next door, promising to fix her porch when I got back. Sunlight filtered through the branches of those woods, dappled the ground in patterns like a stained glass window in church. But the silence was. The birds should have been singing, and the squirrels should have been cussing at each other and chucking nuts. I quickly found more of the red webs between some trunks, and it was smeared with small streaks of blood and a couple of small clumps of hair. The acid that accompanied the gores stung at my eyes, but I kept moving my boots, crunching over the dead leaves with my shotgun pointed up, loaded and ready for anything. And some time passed. I circled the old Miller place. It was an abandoned house, sagging in on itself. The windows punched out like an old-time boxer's. The boards were rotting and the door was hanging off by one rusted hinge. In my periphery I spied something moving inside that was quick and deliberate. I crept slowly closer, every step measured with my breath. Brain shot back to memories of clear compounds in the Helmand province, specifically how I never knew of. Next room had a family or an IED. Inside, the air ineffable tang of the same accurate smell punched me in. The face, the deeper I went. Floorboards groaned and cracked under me. I swept the beam of my headlamp across the walls, and there, glistening and pulsating, were dozens of red cocoons. They hung from the rafters like a Peking duck that you'd find in Chinatown. Could be a day old or a year. Nobody knew, but they were tasty. But not these red cocoons. They were professed, to say the least. Each one was wrapped in a giant ball of red silk, twitching as something inside struggled to get free. I could hear something inside of one softly moaning. I swallowed hard. The webs were thick, and even thicker where they clung to them. I could see the acid eating away the grain and dripping onto the floor. The smell was overpowering, and I heard whimpers from one of the cocoons that was closer to me now. A hand gently pushed out, its fingers scraping at the sticky fibers. I moved in closer, slowly raising my knife, desperate to cut them free. But then I heard it, an awful clicking and dragging sound. I spun around with it, shotgun at the ready. Who was there, crouched in the far corner, watching me? The human wasp, or whatever the hell it was. Its abdomen dragged on the floor, shiny red and black and swollen with some awful cargo. Its wings hung in ripped tatters, completely useless, but twitching with every breath, the creature. And the legs were just like it, wasps, tiny hairs, long and thin, almost stick-like in appearance. And the monster flexed as it rose up each step, completely alien of this earth. Its face glimmered in the headlamp's beam, and its eyes bulged out of its almost human-like. Its curved mandibles connected to a raw exposed jaw. It screeched a saliva-choking, half-muted scream, and I just about from tense. Now, I've seen a lot of horrid things in my day as a soldier, things that people are never meant to see, but this ugly, was never even meant to be. Whoa! Come on, Whitley, I muttered. My voice was shaking as I was thinking about my next move. Are we going to do this? And then it lunged, and I immediately fired the shotgun. The blast echoed throughout the empty house. The creature shrieked and icer sprayed from its side, hissing as it hit me. It didn't stop though, just got angrier. It swung one of those raptorial legs at me, raking across my denim jacket, ripping it in my skin. Staggered back, grabbed my knife, and slashed at it, catching it under the black fluid spilled onto the front. I backpedaled for a minute, and it reared up with its arms outstretched, its wings trying to buzz. It wasn't dying. It was trying to intimidate me, but I don't get intimidated easy. But then a shriek tore through the rafters behind me, and I turned to see a cocoon splitting open with a girl's face peering out. Her eyes were wild and pale and pink. The room was bulging out of her head. The creature, while also looking at the cocoon, was distracted for just a bit longer than I was, and I took my chance. I ran the shotgun under its abdomen, and I pulled the trigger. Its body exploded in a spray of acid and gore, segments split apart, legs thrashing. I dropped the shotgun. My hands were burning, and I grabbed a branch from the debris-strewn floor. I swung with everything I had, beating the thing until it stopped moving, until the only sound was my ragged breathing and the drip of acid on wood. I staggered to the nearest cocoon, took my knife, and I saw it at the silk, and inside was Christress oxenic, or what was left of her. Her face was half dissolved. Her skin was slowing off in sheets, her eyes rolling in terror. She tried to scream, but the lower part of her jaw was gone. I backed away. The other cocoons writhed. As every backstep I took, the voices were muffled and broken. Were already dead. They just didn't know. I stumbled outside, dragging the body of the creature with me. It in lighter fluid, tossed a match, and watched the flames crawl over the shiny exoskeleton. The old house caught fire, racing up the walls and turning the whole place into a heap. I stood there watching it burn. Screams of the dying echoing in my ears. The woods glowed red and casting shadows, flickering like an old movie. The flames roared, swallowing the house, the cocoons, and the monster that haunted our woods. And I sat there and watched it until the roof caved in. Now, I didn't sleep the next night either. You see, every time I closed my eyes, I heard the wet tearing of silk and the sound of Kristen's ruined mouth, trying to make some sort of noise. I mean, yeah, I torched the house. Sure, I did, but I didn't think that was the end. See, ugly things never die easy. They usually burrow deeper, build new nests, just like the Taliban did, just like all insects do. So, I spent the next morning cleaning my wounds, burning the acid out with whiskey and cussing until my voice was gone. The claw marks on my left arm oozed pus and the smell made me gag it. Little, but I wrapped them tight and loaded up my Remington again. If the thing had kin, I was coming from. And so I started at the edge of Old Grady's pond, following the red webs throughout the brush. Flies swarm thick in the air, drawn in by the branches started to hang heavy, with silk sagging under the weight, and something dripped from above and spattered onto my cheek. I wiped it away, and I pressed on. The trail ended at a low gully thick with cattails and mud. The air stank of a sulfurous swamp, water the color of a bad coffee mixed with duckweed, and they're half submerged in the reeds. Saw the nest. Now when I say nest, it wasn't a hive. Well, not really. It was more of a tangle of logs and stumps, all webbed together with that red silk, and another creature was there hulking over the water and dragging a fresh cocoon. Behind it, the cocoon writhed as if there was something inside clawing for freedom, and the human wasp's mandibles clicked, the drool dripping from its mouth as it pulled its prize to the edge of the pond. But I just sat there, watching. Creature took the cocoon and threw it into the water with a splash. Bubbles rose, popping along the surface. As the water turned red and yellow, bubbles rose and popped on the surface. The creature held the cocoon under its arm, digging in as the person inside flinched and shrieked. The sound was muffled and desperate, and then I saw the silk slowly unravel, the flesh slowing off into the water. The wasp creature watched it with its eyes glistening. There was nothing human in that stare. There was no mercy. There was no regret. Just a hunger. And then something in me snapped. Broke cover and I charged down the embankment with the shotgun raised. Thing turned, the water streaming off of its abdomen with the mandibles snapping. Aggressively, I fired the shotgun and the blast catched it right in the chest. Chunks of slime and shell exploded out. Staggered back, but it didn't fall down. I pumped in another shell and I fired, again hitting it straight in its head. One of its eyes burst everywhere, black ichor pouring down its face. The creature shrieked. It buzzed its wings, and it lunged again. We crashed into the mud, but unfortunately, its claws were digging for my throat. Knife up, catching it in the joint, between thorax and abdomen. Its face got a bit too close, dripping acid onto my cheek and my ear. I screamed a rage-filled scream and drove the knife in. Deeper. The thing reared up while its legs were thrashing, but I grabbed it, nearby branch just as I had before, and I rammed it down again and again. The creature's exoskeleton snapped into pieces. Greenish fluid sprayed everywhere, and it twitched and convulsed, trying to crawl away, but I kept swinging until it stopped moving, until it was just a heap of twitching legs. As my face was on fire, I staggered back, noticing my arm was also in agony. The lifeless cocoon floated to the surface of the pond. I got in and I dragged it out while I was cutting at the silk, praying that there was something left to save inside. Inside was a man half dissolved. skin slowing off like wet clay in its eyes staring right past me. I stumbled up the bank, retching until nothing else came out. I doused that whole mess in lighter fluid. I flicked my last match and I watched it all go up. The webs, the nest, the monster's broken body, the man in the cocoon. The flames hissed and popped in oily smoke through the trees. Then I stood there and I watched it end. The glow of my shotgun slung over my shoulder, my face searing with pain. And I smiled a bit. I spent the next week in a fever haze drifting in and out on Mrs. Odell's old couch. She found me stumbling up her walk at dawn. My face was blistered and my arm was leaking. Pus smelling like a distillery fire. She patched me up with trembling hands and never asked about the blood in my hair or the burns on my jaw. You know, small people have a way of knowing when not to ask. They just take care of each other. That's the way I like it. The sheriff came around a few days later. His eyes were ringed in a way that seasonal allergies hit you. He had his hat held in his hand. Told me about the missing persons. 6 now, counting. Kristen. He looked at my bandages, the mud caked onto my boots, and he finally said, you see anything out there, Jimmy?" There was a certain desperation in his voice. I looked him in the eye and lied through my teeth. "Nah, just Coyote Sheriff. Maybe a bobcat. You know, I'll keep an eye out." It nodded and drove off, leaving me alone with the truth. I tried to go back to normal. I did fix Mrs. Odell's porch, hammered the boards into place with hands that couldn't stop shaking, mowed the grass at the church. I nodded. All the neighbors who watched me with. No one mentioned the missing after. That small towns have long memories, but even longer silences sometimes. And one evening, as the sun bled out, behind the trees, I sat on my porch with a nice cold Corona, watching the woods. A little fox trotted by, pausing to sniff out the air. Then it melted into the shadows. The silence pressed in and I laughed. "To hell with you," I said, raising my bottle to the tree. "And you want another round? You know where to find me." The wind rattled the branches and a scrap of red silk fluttered from a thorn bush, catching the last light like a warning. Now I remember the way the human wasps' eyes had looked at me in the end. Both were fearless and empty and ancient. It didn't beg me. It didn't try to run. It had just fought until there was nothing left to fight with. Something about that nodding, deep nodding thing that I couldn't shake loose. I finished my Corona, tossed the bottle into the recycling bin with a clatter, and I limped my ass inside. The screen door slammed behind me, cutting off the tomorrow. I think I'd like to fix someone's leaky sink. I'd like to patch a roof or a chair